Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. I've got a few things we're going to be covering in this episode. We're going to start with the Human Rights Commission new head resigning rather than being scrutinized over his alleged anti-Semitic media posts. We're going to talk about how the Canadian police chiefs met in Halifax and started to beg for more money and beg for more resources to stop many of the protests that are running up and down this country. National Rail has decided that they're going to stop transporting hazardous goods, which I had mentioned in the upcoming looming strike. The Saskatchewan town is offering developers an extra 30 grand to come out and build houses in their region because they have too many people coming in for all the jobs that they have available. We're going to talk about how Trudeau is ignoring the mass businesses that are running away from the EV market and how he thinks that it's just a blip and blump in the road. All that's coming up. But before we get into it, I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your friends. I have an open GoFundMe, which I'll try to remember to post in the description of this video. And I have memberships if you wish to support the channel that way. So like I said, we're going to begin with the Human Rights Commission, the man that was just selected a couple of months ago to lead the way and was immediately pointed out that he has posted many anti-Semitic things on social media. And the Liberal minister didn't care. They ignored the calls. The embattled human rights chief resigns as review concludes he intentionally omitted name information, which I guess means that he was using a different name for some of his posts. A Jewish advocacy organization had raised concerns about Burju Datani's appointment due to his past anti-Israel social media posts. And I just feel like if we took that and put it into anti-Islamic posts, there would have been no discussion. Or if we put it into anti-LGBT posts, there would have been no discussion. If we put it into anti-body issue posts, if we put it into a million right? If we just put anti in front of it and then added a social component behind it, there would have been no question. And I think that it's important that we start to establish one set of rules for everybody, not a different set of rules for different people. And I know the far left wants everybody to be playing against each other so that they can get away with moving all of the wealth to the top and make the rest of us a bunch of peons. But it's up to channels like mine, it's up to people like us to make sure that this doesn't happen, that we start to apply the rules of the law and the rules of equality equally, that we apply all of them to everyone the same. Because there can be no such thing as equality if we do not apply the rules equally. Telling yourself that you're born in a certain way or you have a certain affiliation, and that somehow gives you the right to say something that another group doesn't, is completely and utterly the opposite of equal. That is, in fact, unequal. And I just feel like there would have been no delay, no hesitation had these posts been against anybody else. And that makes you wonder who's at the top pulling the strings, what their particular political affiliation is. If we're going to be calling this person for the Human Rights Commission, I just feel like we have to ensure that this person is not just another liberal appointee. Anyway, I'll move on I'll leave that one for a different story. Okay, so let's move on to some more far left hypocrisy. Canada's police chiefs call for more help to deal with the increasing number of protests. I got no sympathy for them whatsoever. The frequency of protests linked to domestic and global issues is creating an unsustainable demand on policing services across the country, says Canada's Chiefs of Police. Meeting in Halifax on Tuesday for its annual summit, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police called on all levels of government to provide the moral and financial support necessary to meet the demands of service. First of all, there's very little that the federal government has to do with policing. They have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I give you that. But these are not the people that are standing up to protest. These are the guys that are arresting the press on the demands of the Liberal office. These are the guys that are attacking independent journalism. The provincial and the city police work for the mayors and the premier. And when you start saying to yourself that it's okay that I use my police force to deliver coffee and donuts to people who are blocking hardworking Canadians from getting to work on the highway, or blocking hardworking Canadians from getting to work in the street, or when you see that same group standing outside of a hospital and picketing a hospital filled with sick and injured while the police idly watch, you have no sympathy from me. You don't deserve to be wearing the badge that you're wearing it when you allow people to terrorize people who are in a hospital based on the God that they pray to. And I feel like you asking for assistance, you asking for more money is kind of like the people would have felt inside of those dwelling, right? It's kind of the way that people would have felt when they were standing in there looking out the window, watching this massive crowd outside the street, yelling and screaming and beating drums and talking through megaphones. Those people too would have loved to have had some help. Or when the people are stranded on the highway because the guys that are picketing are still eating the coffee and donuts that you brought them. Those people too would have loved some assistance. And I believe that if you want to apply a two-tiered policing system, then you probably should find the money on your own. You probably shouldn't be asking every Canadian to give you more money when you're not policing every Canadian the same. I mean, now that you hear it out loud, doesn't it seem a little bit outrageous that you should be asking Canadians for money when you don't treat them all the same? Do you think maybe that you should probably go back to the beginning and start at scratch and decide to yourself that what you're going to do is keep the peace? Because we call it police, but really it's supposed to be a peace officer who is supposed to apply the law equally. Not to be the judge, not to be the jury, but this is the city code, this is the provincial code, this is the federal code. These are the laws that you must maintain. And if you break or breach those laws in any way, shape, or form, we are going to exercise our rights and fulfill the law and keep the peace and keep you from disturbing people no matter where they're from, no matter what religion they are. I think then you will find that you will get some sympathy from all levels of government. That's just my opinion. Now you can leave me your opinion down in the comments. A couple of episodes ago, I did a report on CN and CPKC are about to go on strike, and that neither side is blinking and neither side is willing to budge. Now, the article that I talked about and the point I was making in that wasn't specifically about the wage increase or the treatment of them. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of it to understand who is in the right and who is in the wrong. What I do understand is that it's going to impact every single solitary person in this country. And now it's already begun. National Railways stopped some shipments ahead of possible lockout. CN Rail and CPKC have started to embargo shipments of certain hazardous goods ahead of the lockout. As I mentioned to you before, this will stop a lot of shipments that are happening, and it will increase the costs and lower the availability. We need only look at the supply chain shortages that were blamed on the same types of thing during the lockdown to understand the impact that the rail would have, or the shortages of product or the lack of rail movement would have on the culture and the economy as a whole. As I said, I don't know who to blame. I know that what we should never have done is privatized the railway. And the reason I say that is because it's a critical infrastructure, clearly. It travels many places that are secluded, which is why we put chemicals and dangerous things on them. We can say that the entire load can be put on one train as opposed to part of a load being put on 25 or 50 trucks. Because if we have tons and tons and tons of chemicals that are dangerous, hazardous material that need to be put on a train, that can be put on one train. Whereas we have to divide it up against however many trucks, which then allows for us to have that many possibilities of issues and concerns. Right. So when we say, oh, well, there's one train traveling with nuclear waste on it, and if anything happens to it, don't worry about it because it's traveling through the upper Rocky Mountains. No big deal. Whereas we say that same train hazardous material has been broken down into 75 tractor trailers that all have to be followed by police officers in hazmat gear. And Lord help us if one of those trucks gets in an accident. Now we got 50 things to worry about. And those are all passing through major urban areas, because that's where highways go. They at least go around them. And that's just like one example of how this is going to spiral out of control for us. Now, again, I will reiterate, I'm not trying to pick a side on who should pay and what and all of that stuff. What I am trying to say is that the government needs to understand that by releasing control of the railway to privatization, they opened themselves up for this. Whereas had we still had control of it as a critical infrastructure, and I'm not trying to advocate for, this is strictly a military concept, right? We need to keep things moving, things flowing. And this is called critical infrastructure. And we have lots of it. And it should never be given to the control of the private industry, because private industry is not motivated by you and me and looking after the nation as a whole. Private industry is worried about keeping their shareholders happy, or private industry is worrying about getting more overtime. And I don't blame them for having those concerns. What I do say is that they should not be having those concerns like two dogs fighting over a bone, when the bone is what supplies most of the country with everything that it uses on a day-to-day basis. I think that we can all agree on that. Additionally, when that very same bone is one of the ways that we transport dangerous and hazardous material around large metropolitan areas so that we can alleviate any concerns or any dangers. And again, I think we can all agree on that. So this is now having the impact where if you're putting anything on a train today, you run the risk of it not reaching its destination, because that's the reason that they're not accepting any more hazardous material, because they don't want that hazardous material to be left on the line should any of the 9,000 engineers go on strike and refuse to move the train, or any of the support staff that go along with that refuse to move the train, and it's sitting somewhere at mile marker such and such, abandoned and empty, and just waiting for the strike to end. I picked the story up from the Regina Ledger. A Saskatchewan town offers developers 30,000 incentives to address housing shortage. We need to do this because Moman is growing like crazy right now, said town's economic development officer Casey McCormack. In an attempt to achieve city status, the town of Moman is offering $30,000 to those building homes in a community desperate for housing. The population of the southern Saskatchewan community was tallied at 2,657 in 2021. But with commercial construction on the rise and jobs in potash and agriculture thriving, Moman's economic development officer says there aren't enough homes to accommodate the growth. We need to do this because Moman is growing like crazy. There's nowhere for people to live. All of our rentals are completely full, and houses are pretty scarce as well. Now, they applied for the Housing Accelerator Fund and they were approved for it. And apparently this $30,000 is going to be coming out of the Housing Accelerator Fund, and it will be attached to any housing permit that was given after August 21st of 2023. So right now, that means that they got a bunch of houses ready to go, a bunch of permits, a bunch of places have been permitted, and they don't have anybody there working on them as yet, which is exactly what I said when they tried to tell me that they were going to build 3 million houses within, blah, blah, blah. Like, the Liberals have absolutely no idea how to build houses. They have absolutely no idea how to solve the problem that they created. And you have to wonder why they would start to make such outlandish claims. Are they also hoping that you yourself do not understand how homes are built? I'm not 100% certain. What I can say with absolute certainty is this tiny little community has a potash fertilizer, and they have a lot of farming. They got 3,000 people in it. In order to retain the grant money, the town is required to build 43 units by 2027, 36 of which need to be multi-units, and 4 that must be multi-units with no shared spaces. Now, what does that mean? That means that they got to build 36 apartment buildings. 4 of those apartment buildings can't have a shared laundry room. You can probably have the same garbage can, but you got to have no shared laundry room, and obviously no bathroom, no kitchen, those kinds of things like you might see in another dwelling. The issue, of course, is that you need somebody that knows how to pour a foundation, then frame a house, then you need an electrician, then you need a plumber, then you need house. Oh, man, the number of tradesmen that go into a house is the issue, right? We've spent 20 years telling everybody to go into computers. And now we don't have any plumbers, electricians. We don't have any flooring. We don't have any drywallers. We don't have any roofers. I mean, these trades, though, many people look right past them like they aren't important, are exceedingly important, and they make really good money. But the government hasn't put any of that money towards training them right out of high school. They're trying to tell them all to go become some sort of, go to university, spend a lot of money, but not necessarily come out of university with a decent job. Whereas this is, a year in school and then 3 years under the tutelage of somebody who's already licensed. Most of these trades, some of them can be learned right on the job, like roofing, though it does take a certain kind of constitution because the job is it's hot up there. So if you can't really handle the heat, otherwise, you can be shown how to do it basically as you go along. Physical, backbreaking, as the expression goes, but good pay. Same with flooring, hard on the knees, good pay. Cabinet installer, that's mostly done on location. That's mostly done off location. They come in, they make some measurements, then they go back to the shop, they cut everything up, and then they come back and then they install it. All of which takes time, logistics, people. None of which a developer is going to be able to come to a town with only 26,000 and just say, here, let me throw up a couple of houses for you right away. Even though you have the plans, even though you have the permits. That is $30,000 to move your entire crew to this little town where they have no place to stay. So you got to bring a fleet of Winnebagos with the winter setting in. Now, I'm not trying to knock the town of Moman. I understand that they're up against it. I understand it completely. The issue is that there's no supply for this, right? There's nobody who knows. You can't just, say, oh, I'm good at math and then start installing electricity. And you can't install electricity and say, no, I get it. So let me install the plumbing. Those trades are skilled. Same with pouring the concrete. That's a skilled labor. Flooring, again, there's a lot of math involved and measurements and, once you learn it, you make it looks easy, but getting there, it takes time and it's a required skill. So you can see how this is going to create a lot of issues under the Housing Accelerator Fund. And this is going to create a lot of issues for economic growth in this country. And the Liberal government has absolutely no idea how to solve the problem that they created. And stories like this prove it, right? Here you have a town with all the money. They got all the need. They got all the jobs. There's even justification in this tiny little town to build these because this tiny little town with what the jobs you just listed off, a potash factory and agriculture, can attract, 25 aged men who just want to go there to do the job. And then, once they get settled down, then they'll look for a wife or they'll, bring a wife with them or whatever. And at that point, they might look for a piece of land and build a house. But in the short term, they're just going to need somewhere to stay. So a high density building seems appropriate in that term because it's just single men that are going to come, settle down, and then, in theory, put roots down and so on and so forth. So Justin Trudeau has finally decided to talk to the press again after going on vacation and then just popping up randomly here and there all over the country at various far left events. And I guess that was done so that he could avoid talking to any independent press over the summertime and making his numbers really tank. They went to great lengths to hide where he was going to show up until he was but a few minutes from arriving there. Then they would release that information on his itinerary. So that can only be in an effort to avoid talking to independent media. However, I guess with this new announcement for Goodyear and Napanee, he couldn't avoid that. And it's getting close to the House coming back. So I suppose he's got to pop his head up sooner or later. Trudeau defends billions spent attracting electric vehicle industry to Canada. We know that electric vehicles are going to be essential for the future, and the choices that we've made as a government have ensured that Canada will be part of it. Now, I'm not 100% sure how he figures we're going to be part of it when many of the choices that he made, those companies have already left the country, like the one in Kingston, for example. Prime Minister Trudeau defended his government's decisions to spend billions attracting electric vehicle manufacturing, arguing some recent slowdowns in the market are just bumps along the road, which might have been a poor pun. Canada has positioned itself to be a leader in the EV industry, And we will continue to be, because those are where the jobs are going to be, not just a couple of years from now, but a decade from now, a generation from now, as he desperately tries to convince the young men of the world that they're going to have a job there making electric car batteries. Trudeau was in Napanee, Ontario, where he announced 44.3 million alongside 20 million from the government of Ontario to go towards a 575 million expansion of a Goodyear plant in the community. The expanded plant will come with 200 new jobs and will help produce tires for EV vehicles. Okay, so those of you that might not be aware, an electric vehicle has a different tire left to right because friction will drain an electric battery faster. So when they are driving on the road, they want as less tire on the road as possible. And I know you see all of these videos where the torque has them coming off the line really quickly and they're moving really fast, and 0 to 60 is faster than lightning type of thing. However, the friction that the tire is exerting on the road is draining the battery quicker than if there were not as much friction. So they build specialized tires for the particular vehicle. Personally, in my opinion, that's a way better investment in Goodyear, which is a well-established company. It's been around a long time. It's got a lot of goodwill throughout the communities of the world. And if people are going to be manufacturing rubber for vehicles, they're going to be more guaranteed that those jobs will sustain rather than the batteries. And I think that the current situation with the batteries points to the proof in that. The Kitchener guy already left, and the people in Stellantis are talking about toning it down. Ford has said, well, we were going to put trucks there, but now we're just going to build gas-powered trucks. And we can see that those decisions are going to impact jobs that were promised in accordance with this billions of dollar bailout billions of dollars of tax write-offs. This Goodyear investment, however, is a fraction of the cost, and 200 jobs goes a long way. And Napanee is not a very big, it doesn't have a big city in it. So it's got, a good chance of bringing good jobs to that region, where there'll now be 200 new families that might be supported by this investment from both the federal and the provincial government to give money to a large corporation. And the rubber will once you're manufacturing the tires, you can basically change the dies to change the size of the tire with relative ease. So if for whatever reason the EV tire market falls apart, there'll always be a new place for those tires to go. And that is why I think this investment's much better. I think that Justin Trudeau trying to convince you that don't worry about it, EV cars are going to be this big splash, this big impact, is not necessarily true. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you next time.